Women have claimed oppression in many areas of life. Equality is a stated aim of feminism and is frequently pushed as an ideal by government. But what does equality mean? And do women really want to be treated the same as men? Looking into what's been happening in our society, I don't believe that women want equality now, or indeed ever have. The behaviour of women clearly shows that what women actually want is equality when it suits them, and preferential treatment the rest of the time.
The whole driving force for seeking equality rests on the accepted belief that we live in a male-dominated society. This is also termed patriarchy.
That is exactly the kind of arrogant, stereotypical male thinking that led to the oppression of gay women, as a matter of fact, all women.
And then, we laid the patriarchy on them.
In this patriarchy, everything is run by men, for the good of men, and to the detriment of women.
On the face of it, it would seem that women may have a point. Most of Parliament and the judiciary are men. Most of the powerful jobs are held by men. Women didn't have equal property rights before 1893, they couldn't vote until 1918, women used to be prevented from going to university, women were often stuck in unwanted marriages. Surely we've always lived in a patriarchy. But does run by men mean run for men?
Although there are men in Parliament, there's also women, but those men in the main, and as indeed most men do, they're just there to enact policies, laws or whatever it is, irrespective of being a man, if you see what I mean. So that this fallacy that because it's a so-called male-dominated society that somehow men will only ever do things to benefit men is absolute tosh.
It's an established fact in psychology that both men and women are happiest with men in authority. Men want to be led by men, and women want to be led by men.
What feminists chose to call patriarchy was nothing more than a division of labour between men and women, which was, until the 1960s, essential and natural.
A culture did emerge from that division, in which men were widely believed to be superior, and in which women were defined by law and custom as the burdens of men.
The key term here, however, is burden. There were few, if any, tangible benefits to men by this arrangement. The spurious idea of superiority by virtue of sex was unfortunate, because men and women were never meant to be in competition with each other. Women are not the opposite sex, they're the complementary sex.
What this apparent superiority brought men was the duty to fight duels to the death over a woman's honour. The legal responsibility to be punished for any crime committed by his wife, for example debtor's prison, the right to go down with a ship while women were rescued, and the right to military conscription whilst women stayed safe at home. It's strange how a patriarchal privilege has far more restricted men's freedoms in life than women's.
But women chose not to see this reality, and instead saw men as being free, with no obligations and no one to tell them what to do, the same way that children see their parents.
Women chose to ignore the near complete lack of choices open to men in all periods of history, chose not to notice the conscripted men coming back from war, and instead chose to focus on issues more important to them. The entirely selfish attitude of women, so clearly displayed during the First World War, continues to this day. Despite what we're repeatedly told, we do not live in a male-dominated society.
The way I believe we've been built by nature is that men are the doers in terms of the world outside of the immediate home, certainly, outside of the nest. The men are the doers of things outside of the nest. And women have basically taken responsibility for the nest, but they are also the manipulators and the energizers of the men out there. So I see women very much in control. They certainly are in charge of the upbringing of the children. They certainly are the ones who indoctrinate them with their views.
She tried to lecture us on patriarchy and all that guff, and I said, there's no such thing as patriarchy in the West. I said, you know that. In fact, it's a matriarchy. She was talking all 70s speak, you know, how women were oppressed economically, sexually, socially, and I thought, you're going to make me cry in a minute, you know what I mean? I said, I don't meet any woman these days, especially young women, that is repressed. I said, and when I speak to all the journalists that I speak to, and I do speak to an awful lot of young women, I say, do you feel repressed sort of sexually, economically, socially? They just laugh. You know, it's a joke.
The only things that men dominate in Western society are the figures for heart attacks, homelessness, workplace deaths, and suicides. Like so many of the slogans invented by feminism, the term male-dominated is a myth, and always has been.
It hasn't been a case of, for how many thousands of years that we've been on the earth, in the last 70 years women have suddenly got power. That's absurd. It's gone around in cycles. Societies have evolved. Women have had lots of power, then they've had few power, and then they've had more power, and then it's gone to low power, and then they've had the same with men. It's not starting from point 0, moving to point kind of 100 over here.
Do you think that we live in a male-dominated society?
We do, but we also live in a society in which males are dominated. Of course, if you look around, men have all the best jobs. They're the presidents of countries and the CEOs and the high flyers. And when people talk about male-female equality, what they mean is women should be equal with those men at the top. But it's not a particularly representative sample of how all men fare in life. Yes, men are at the top, but men are also at the bottom. They have all they tend to die earlier. They die of all known causes of death at a faster rate than women. They have all the crappiest jobs. The rate of 95% of workplace fatalities are male, so they have the riskiest, most unpleasant jobs. The bin men, the loggers, the construction workers. So there's a lot of men at the bottom too, and so you get men at the bottom, men at the top, and kind of women in the middle. And when people talk about male domination, they forget that the winners, the male winners, are not just quotes dominating the women; they're also dominating the others too.
Men did not sit down and design our culture to suit themselves and keep women down.
The reason for this arrangement was that if women were to have babies, if the tribe was to reproduce, a system of concessions was required which allowed for the uncertainty of women to know when they might be pregnant and for how long they might be caring for infants. Marriage itself was created as one such concession. Marriage is primarily a social construct designed to protect and nurture women who could not control fertility.
One of the vows of getting married is that you accept responsibility for somebody for life.
This is why sex before marriage has always been a volatile issue in Western societies, especially before the contraceptive pill.
The overriding issue was that because fertility couldn't be controlled, any woman who had sex could become pregnant. If the man she had sex with was not committed to her, there was a big problem. Marriage guaranteed as far as possible that the man having sex with her was willing to support any resulting child. Birth control provided by the pill has wildly changed this maxim. Because of the complete control that women now have over fertility, society no longer attempts to enforce a link between sex and commitment. This might seem liberating for both sexes, but in fact, only women have been liberated by the pill.
Men have been enslaved.
Despite the complete 100% control women have over creating children given to them by the pill and other methods, they have still chosen to force fatherhood on men who do not want to be fathers. What it's really meant is that millions of men who don't want children, are not ready for children, or who can't afford them, are being forced into fatherhood by women after casual sexual encounters that were never intended to produce a family. Broken families are inevitably the outcome. Men of today's older generation grew up with overbearing chivalry, where it was held that civilized men protected women against anything and everything, and treated women as superior beings. Men would stand up when a woman came to a table, and men would stand up when a woman left a table, or cover a puddle with their coats. As a consequence, women were seen by men and by women as needing protection, just like children.
To this day, men still protect women at the expense of themselves. Women are happy for this to continue and allow it to continue, whilst all the while claiming that they want equality.
If you don't mind my being crude, the boss is in the men's room.
No, that's not crude.
Well, you never know how you're going to offend some broad these days.
I remember opening a door to a woman, actually, kind of last year. I opened a door to a woman, and she turned around and swore at me for opening the door for her.
And you suddenly find you're getting up to off your seat and you're getting a mouthful from her, or you open the door and she'll huff away past, or...
These women will complain that a man is a chauvinist when he opens a door for them, but will say nothing when they're rescued first, and he's left to drown. Considering all this, how can patriarchy exist? If patriarchy existed, circumcision of boys would be outlawed as it is for girls.
We're happy to accept male circumcision, but not female circumcision.
Female circumcision is considered abuse, regardless of religious imperative. Why are boys not protected in the same way? If patriarchy existed, it would be women dying on our battlefields, and women digging up our coal. Only women would be sweeping our streets and collecting our rubbish. Where a woman wasn't strong enough for a task, we'd use 2 women. It would be women working until age 65, and men working until 60 to earn a pension. Women will often compare their supposed oppression under patriarchy to the legitimate trials of the black civil rights movement.
You have no idea how hard it is.
I have no idea.
Look, I'm not going to fight about whether in medicine it's harder being black or a woman.
Black?
Woman?
Much prop, Dr. Rhodes. Go get him.
To outlaw discrimination against you if you're black, if you're a woman.
But women have never had to sit at the back of the bus, have never been ghettoised, and have never been prevented from eating or drinking in shops. Women have never been arrested, beaten, lynched, or hanged for being women. In contrast, women have always been sheltered and protected from the harshness of reality, whilst men, and even boys, dealt with problems.
Chong Cha goes on patrol with a 13-year-old boy, whom he instructs in the dangers of government ambushes and landmines.
We have been fighting and protecting our women and children since 1975 till now. I was about his age, and now I am 42 years old and still doing the same thing.
If we're looking at enlightenment and of the struggle away from victimhood, women haven't had that big a problem moving away from victimhood. There certainly hasn't been in the league of the struggle, for example, of blacks in America moving away from victimhood, or the Jews in Germany moving away from victimhood, or Palestinians currently trying to move away from victimhood. It certainly hasn't been in that class of struggle. That's likely to be unpopular, but let's face it, it hasn't.
Women have more disposable income than men, due to having access to men's money as well as their own.
Women, by and large, have 70% of the spending power in the Western societies. They spend 70% of the money.
Women also have longer lifespans.
In the UK, the average life expectancy for women is 81. The average male life expectancy is 76.
Never in the history of mankind has an oppressed people lived for longer and had more money to spend than their oppressors. And it's not a little more money, it's a lot more.
Young women have been avoiding central London since the July terror bombings. It's a trend that's worrying retailers.
I don't really like to come into the capital, not really often, no.
So how does the West End woo us women back?
This is why shops always have the men's department upstairs or downstairs, or out of sight at the back of the store. Shops are overwhelmingly designed for women.
What the city experts say is this: the key to the whole show is women's wear. If you get that right, everything else falls into place. If you don't get that right, it doesn't matter what you do with men's wear and food, nothing works. So it's all about women's wear.
As a result of this invented idea of patriarchy, we've attempted to swing the pendulum back the other way in order to be fairer to women.
Do not try and bend the spoon. That's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth.
What truth?
There is no spoon.
There is no pendulum. It's not the case now, nor has it ever been true, that men had things good at the expense of women. If we put down men in order to boost oppressed women, as has been happening for the last 50 years, but women are not actually being oppressed, you end up with discrimination against men. This is what's happening in employment today. Women are being favoured in all areas of the workforce at the expense of men. We feel that by being biased towards females, we're making up for our past oppression of them.
We will legislate to give more scope for employers, if they want to increase the number of women or black or Asian employees, to take positive action.
Every time we give her a job and he's left unemployed, every time she gets a promotion and he's denied one, every time she's selected for a university course and he's turned away, we believe that this is some small compensation to women for past abuses. But what if those abuses never happened?